The cost per click that you're paying on advertising platforms like Google Ads, Microsoft Advertising, Facebook, and even X is probably more than it actually needs to be. And you're not entirely to blame for this. The advertising platforms do a really good job at making you feel like you're making a mistake if you set a low cost per click. And if you're on automated bidding, this would essentially be having a performance target, like a target return on ad spend, that's too broad and isn't strict enough to drive a lower cost per click. So in this week's video, I want to help save you some money. I'm going to share with you my general advertising philosophy that I use across every single platform. I've spent well over $50 million in the past 10 years in online advertising, and this simple strategy that I'm about to share with you has helped me drive efficient and profitable results year after year. So if you want to save some money in advertising platforms like Google Ads, stick around and make sure to grab my free PPC cost-cutting cheat sheet. You can get it at scottredgate.com/cheat sheet. This document is packed with tips to help you save money in your advertising account based off of mistakes that I've made. So I've made these mistakes, I've wasted money so that you don't have to. But let's go ahead and dive into the screen share. So if you've ever set up an advertising campaign, and most likely you've used Google Ads, but this also holds true to platforms like Microsoft Advertising, Facebook, and some of the others. As you're setting up a campaign, you've probably realized or recognized certain recommendations that these platforms are sharing with you to drive more clicks by setting a high bid. So for example, maybe you're setting up a campaign and there's a recommended bid of $10 that the advertising platform is recommending you have. And let's say you decide that you want to set a lower bid than that. Soon after, you might be greeted with a message like this that says eligible limited, that scares you into upping your bid back to that level that was recommended in the campaign setup process. So in other words, these advertising platforms do a really good job at scaring you and saying that you need to set a super high bid. Or if you're using automated bidding, this would have the same effect as if you set a super broad performance target. Like let's say your target ROAS was set to a super low level, or your target CPA was set to a super high level. That would have the same impact to what I'm describing. The general idea is that these platforms are encouraging you to not waste any opportunity to see clicks, and so they're recommending either setting high bids or low performance targets. But here's the thing. If you actually back out of it and think about some basic economics behind it, this is essentially what's happening behind the scenes, right? So this is a simple graph where I have the cost per click on the x-axis and the quantity of clicks on the y-axis. And so what's happening here is if you were to set a low cost per click, if you're running manual bidding, that does limit the number of clicks that you can drive for that campaign. But in this example, like let's say you set a 50-cent max CPC, you are still able to get 100 clicks at that cost per click. And so if that was your actual CPC, you were still able to receive 100 clicks. But you can see what happens as you go up this cost per click level. You're eligible to new inventory that platforms like Google have, which can increase the number of clicks that you get. So like, let's go to the extreme here. So if you're willing to bid $10 from a cost per click standpoint, you're going to receive something like 1,000 clicks in this example. But unless you have a startup or your goal truly is just driving as many clicks as possible, or let's say you have a brand new product and you just want to drive as much awareness as possible, the goal of a successful Google Ads account, the goal of a successful Microsoft advertising account is not to drive as many clicks as you can, but the goal is to drive as much profit possible from that advertising account. And so I have a whole video on this about finding your Google Ads sweet spot. And I've also done a video recently about how you could potentially spend 80% less to see less than a 20% reduction in your conversions. But the general thought behind it is you're spending too much. You don't have to be at this level right here, which in this example is $10, even if the advertising platforms are encouraging you to be at that level. So my recommendation when you start a campaign is not to start at the high level, but to start at the bottom level and work your way up. And here's the reason why. If you were to start with a $10 cost per click, what typically happens, or what I've seen with the businesses that I've worked with that have this type of philosophy, they start at a $10 cost per click, they receive a ton of clicks in the campaign or in the account. But then what they realize is that they're not profitable. The campaign is not efficient. And what they do is they have a knee-jerk reaction where they just shut the campaign off. They say, Google Ads isn't for me. Microsoft advertising isn't for me. Let me go try another channel. Now, there are some experts that would say that if you're too restrictive at the beginning, meaning your cost per click is too low or your target return on ad spend is too high, you're not going to allow the AI and automation that these platforms have been working on for years to be able to really do its thing. And now, while there is some truth to that, I don't want you to waste a ton of money just because you're blindly going with the recommendations that are set in these platforms to have high cost per clicks or low performance targets. And so here is my general philosophy that I use in almost every account that I work with. I call it the stair-step approach. Basically, when I launch a new campaign, I start with a low cost per click, and I'm very active in the measurement of how many clicks I'm able to receive at that level. And so what I do is I launch the campaign with a low cost per click. I'll wait a few days, maybe even a couple of weeks, and I'll see the click volume that I was able to get at that level. And then you can look at metrics like impression share or absolute impression share, and I've got a whole video on that. But to see if there's a lot more opportunity out there. But it's all about finding that sweet spot where you're driving a significant amount of clicks, but you're doing it at a cost per click level that is not insane. But if you are super impatient and you have to get results now, this might not be the best method for you. But if you want to see long-term success in your advertising account, I find that it's a lot easier to start low and work your way up versus starting high and either remaining high or trying to back down from that point.